So my name is Eric Linton. I have 3 children. Our first one is just turned 6 years old this year. And he was they were all surprises. Every child was a surprise, right? And we weren't expecting any child. But him being our first, he was the most of all the surprise because we were in the midst of a remodel of a house and learned the day that we signed the deed that we were having a baby. And so it went from 2 years to 8 months till we had to finish the remodel. And so that kind of, in the process of us moving back, and he was the one that spurred the most questions. What do we do? How do we want to raise kids? Do we even want children? That was, things crossed our minds. And so he was our first, and Amelia is our second. She has just turned 3 years old. And then we had our third baby, Reed. He is 10 months old, just turned 10 months. And so we have about almost 2.5 years in between each one, and just have really grown accustomed to now homeschooling. And, in the process of raising Parker in those 2.5 years, we started very early. Amelia was just, it was more freestyle with her. She was just kind of listening in on more of what Parker does. And, Reed is now pulling books off the shelf. So at this point, we're kind of like, okay, he's ready to homeschool too. So we put him right up there in the midst of them. And so we're homeschooling all of them. And so they all just sit there, and one of them doesn't know what we're talking about, and the other sort of does, and the other tries not to listen. So it's right where we're at with all 3 of our children.
And how long have you guys been married?
We have been married, 10 years, right at 10 years. It's easy to remember at this point. We were married when I was within my first year of graduate school. And so we had met in college, and I fought it, but she was after me. So at some point you just kind of got to give in, and
sometimes you're irresistible.
Sometimes you just say, okay, whatever, it's fine. No, I pursued her for a long time, and after several years of dating, we decided that we didn't want to wait any longer, and got married just in time to go skiing in Canada. So that's
awesome.
That's it's just been a downhill ride for us since then. So
now, as far I know, Stephanie, your wife, stays home, but there's also some things that she does a little bit kind of outside of the home, flexible. And so maybe what does she do, and then what do you do as well?
Well, I'm a pastor primarily. I have just come out of the business world. I still am helping in that business, kind of transitioning out. But pastor is my primary role, and so I'm a pastor of a church here in town, Baptist church. Stephanie is her primary role is taking care of our children, and then second to that, she has her own the business is called Young Living, and she is into what we call essential oils, and so she's made a business out of that, and it's been very successful for her. And so that it takes over more time than what we would like it to, but that's just because it's she's very good at what she does, and it's very popular. Everyone is accustomed to knowing and getting to know her, and so we both have primary and even secondary things that we're both doing, even tertiary things. I've got 3 things that we're doing right now. So, it's just there's not a minute downtime in our home, regardless of how much is going on in school. And so we really have to be intentional about being with our children, being mom and dad and teacher and principal and disciplinarian and provider, and so we're both doing, we have very specific roles, but we are each providing for our family, bringing in income. So
I'd like to ask, is there very clearly defined roles specifically to within the homeschooling realm? You said 2 words. You said teacher and principal,
yes,
which is something I've heard from other homeschool dads. How would you define what homeschool looks like at your house in terms of roles?
Sure. So I just draw that directly from my role as a father, and of course we draw our biblical roles. That's where we look into Scripture. We look at Scripture and what is the role of the father, what is the role of the mother, and so we just kind of draw our roles in school from that. And so we use our natural abilities, our God-given talents in school. I don't think there's, when I said teacher, I'm a teacher by nature. I love teaching, and so I think that's where I kind of plug in also in that. And so there's a teacher in me, and Stephanie knows that. She knows my passion for teaching and preaching, and so I will use that as a means, as that talent as a strength inside our home. We didn't sit down at the beginning of homeschooling and say, okay, I want to be this guy and you're going to be this guy, and we're going to slice it, this percentage and that percentage. It really just kind of, we look at each other, as husband and wife, and I say, you're much stronger and you're much more passionate towards the children while you're teaching them. And so she has, grace, way beyond what I could ever hope to understand about grace, though I am learning. But she understands grace, and she shows grace to our children. And so she becomes the primary teacher. So when I say primary, I mean she walks through most of the subjects, and she teaches them, and she's patient with them, and colors with them, and draws with them, and spells letters with them, and she moves them along at their pace. I am more the kind of person I'll throw the kids outside and I'll be like, okay, we're doing recess. So you kick the ball over there, you kick it, and it kind of becomes who I am. I'm kind of the driver of the home. And so when we go out, just for example, I do recess. So if you look at a structure of our day, we do our Bible study first. So at 8 o'clock this morning, we had a Bible study, which we incorporate through our family worship in our church. And so that is a crossover time for us. We have a family worship time. So we sat down, we read the Bible together, we prayed together, and we sang together between 8 and 8:10. It doesn't happen every day. It might happen at 8 a.m., it might happen at 8 p.m. But we were able to sit down and read the Bible together today as a family. And then immediately after, we got up and we went outside and we spent 45, 50, almost an hour just in recess. And so we stretched and we, did push-ups where they were on their knees pushing, actually pushing up. And then we got a ball out and we kicked it and we made our own little soccer goal and played soccer. And I teach them how to pass the soccer ball between the two of them, and then how to kick it through the goal, and how to defeat the goalie, so to speak. And so we kind of look at each other, my wife and I'm thinking, we look at each other and we say, okay, what talents do we each have? And from your talents, how can we draw out for our children the most teaching possible? And so as we're drawing that out, that's where they learn. And I'm hoping it's going to work out. We haven't graduated anybody yet, so I'm just kind of sitting back, just praying that the Lord will be gracious towards us. So.
Sure. Now, how did the homeschool journey kind of start for you guys? Now, were you or Stephanie homeschooled as kids, and then kind of, you said Parker was a surprise. So at that point, you got to say, okay, what are our plans here? How did that come about?
We were not homeschooled. Neither one of us were. In fact, we both, for the majority of her schooling, was in public school all the way up through until I think she went to I don't know if you consider a charter school, a private public, kind of crossover hybrid. Yeah. So she went to a charter school in Jacksonville, and I graduated with honors from there. It was a college prep school, and so still in existence, though they changed the name about 10 times since then. But she went, all the way through a public school education, and then went to a private school for college. I went public school all the way up halfway through my grade schooling, and then entered a private school, and then private school undergraduate, graduate degrees. And so we had public and private education between the two of us. It was literally half and half public and private education. We knew what homeschooling meant. We knew what it would look like to be a homeschool family, but we weren't necessarily convinced, even when we first got married, that we would be a homeschooling family. At that point, we lived in Birmingham, and so the school system was a lot different. I mean, there's a lot better of an education. It was actually more of a conservative education than what you might find around here even. And so we were actually thinking of being up there going to school. We made the decision to move back here to my hometown. And to be honest, we looked around and we didn't see the quality education that we wanted to give them. And so based on the kind and the quality, we made the decision, and it was not a short-term decision. It was actually a long-term decision to pray about which we would do, and that being, either private, public, or homeschooling, being the three options. We had almost counted public school out. The simple question was between private and homeschool. Then we saw the cost of private, and that one knocked that one out of the park. And so we were easily, this is a lot cheaper for us. It's just cheaper to do it yourself. And so that's the approach that we took. And we spent a lot of time in prayer about that, and just really examine our motives in doing it. Are we doing it because we just don't want them to be anywhere else? No, we wanted them to have the best education possible. We wanted them to learn subjects that they would not possibly learn in an earlier education, even to the degree that we learned them when we were young. And so the subjects that we wanted to teach them, other languages between Latin and Greek, and we're still praying about even Hebrew, to teach them those kind of languages, to teach them those kinds of skills, to break down languages. That's what we want for them early on in their schooling, and we just didn't see that as being an option anywhere else. And so it was really the lack of education. I hate to say it, but it was the lack of education that drove us to pursue another option. We did not, at the time we had children, we hadn't even made that decision yet. It was actually years after Parker was even born that we finally made that decision. And it was right at the point, he was about 3 years old. And so that's when we made the decision to start looking in the direction of homeschooling. We started down some other roads. We looked at a couple of, popular options, and we still hadn't found anything until he turned about 4 or 5 years old. And when he turned 4, that's when we kind of found another group community that we really enjoyed, and just the options inside that community for homeschooling, that's what we wanted to see. Met literally everything that we wanted in a homeschool group, but also in a homeschool curriculum as well.
I'm curious, what were some of the things on your list?
Really, just the option on language, what they spoke, was for us that we wanted them to have a good grasp of English, but we also wanted them to have a working knowledge of other languages outside of English. And so it was really some of the Latin that kind of drove us to look at what we're doing now. And so that was one. The second one was, would they have a good community of other students that, first of all, would encourage them in learning. And so the encouragement to learn and fostering you use these words like atmosphere, have this atmosphere of something. Well, it was an atmosphere of learning, and that's what we wanted to see, a place where they could actually learn well and learn their subjects well. so that was the second thing. But also just that we would have, a place that that we ourselves could also plug, Stephanie and I, that we could also plug into. And so not even in that order, though. I'm just kind of going through it because languages was actually further down the list. But, really just a community for us, community for them, and then just, an intensive study that they could walk through. So those were just a few things that we had on our list as we were praying about where and what to do early on in the beginning.
I like one of the things that you said earlier, that you and Stephanie kind of from the beginning had a conversation an honest conversation of strengths and weaknesses, that you were able to sit down and say, okay, I love you, but you're bad at this, you're good at this, now you tell me kind of the same. And I wonder maybe just like your thoughts kind of on the importance of that, being able to have those honest conversations. Maybe how did you approach that with your wife? And then maybe if you've seen, some of those benefits, which I know you touched on, but of having that conversation.
The person who approached the other person was she approaching me. You are not good at this.
Okay, great.
She said, you are not good at this. You are not good at this. And so, oh, well, what am I good at? I need to know. And so that's where the conversation started. It was looking at who we are, and when we sat down, it wasn't I wish it was one conversation because that would have been easy. But it was over the course of many conversations that we said, okay, I see in you a weakness in this. Not that we want to always downplay weakness, because actually as a family, we kind of like to, play our weaknesses up. We like to say, hey, I'm weak in this, I need help. And I think that's what the church is for. I think that's what the family is most definitely for. Not just saying you're strong in this, you do this, but you're kind of weak in this area, so let me help you do this. And so it wasn't simply strong in this, you be that person, but it was also, and that's how the conversation started. It was looking at the weaknesses that we each had. You're weak in this. Let me help you do this. And so we came alongside one another. And so she was able to be that teacher who was gracious enough to say, handwriting stuff. I'm just like, no, do this. I can't do that. Yeah, so I have to get outside and kick the ball. At least then they could kick it, and but we looked at in that conversation, or in those sets of conversations, Eric, you're weak in being, what's the word I want to say here? You're weak at your, the word is gone.
You're good.
I don't want to throw a word out there.
Yeah, because that's going to be on tape.
Yep.
So she said, you're really weak at the way you approach people. You're not a very friendly person. Let's just say it very plainly. You're not a very friendly person. You're not a very kind person. So we're going to have to work
you mentioned
on
grace, that she
I
had
did
much
mention
more
grace. Thank you. That's
yeah.
great. She is a very gracious person. Very gracious, and I appreciate that. That's why I married her. I was like, man, I got to have that woman. But I'm not very friendly. I don't smile often. If I do, it's rare, and it's because of what Christ has done in me. It's not because of who I am. And so, trying to be that to our children, to display, because I want my children to learn how to be kind. I don't want them to be friendly. I don't want them to get what I got. I'm like, this.
One of the best of both of you.
Yeah. You go be near your mother for a while. Stay away from me. And so in those conversations, I'm telling you, it was tough. We had to say, you had to kind of bring some stuff up. Well, why am I this way? Mm-hmm. What makes me this way? Well, then you have to go back. You have to reach back into your past and go, well, this is what I learned when I was young. And so there's family traditions that we might have to break from and say, man, I stink at being kind to people. I stink at being, I don't call people, and be friendly to them. I'm like, I lose friends. I lose more friends than, I probably get to know people. And so to me, that's a weakness. And, that's why I need Stephanie to come alongside me so that I can teach them. And one of the things we said just the other day to our children, and we say it often, but just the most recent one, and it happened as a result of us doing something stupid. We said, look, Mommy and Daddy are not perfect. We don't want you to learn. We don't want you to learn to be like Mommy and Daddy. We want you to learn to be like Jesus. And so that's who we want to present to you. And so, we have to say to them, take Mommy and Daddy out of it. And so even the teacher in us, even the coach in us, the principal in us, we always have to present that we are not perfect, and we want them to learn from our mistakes, even sometimes more so than they do our successes. So
something I want to touch on there, which I think is going the same direction that Jordan was going there with this question. Do you or your wife, would you say you're skilled at identifying other people's strengths / weaknesses? And the reason I ask is where I'm headed with this. You mentioned earlier that you had to identify your strengths and then play to those strengths, or identify your weaknesses and shore them up.
Yeah.
I think dads listening to this could benefit, especially if you can illuminate some of it, how to identify strengths in their kids, to identify some of those strengths or identify some of those weaknesses that maybe they want to, maybe they see themselves in like a weakness of yours that you see in your kids. Oh no, I got to help them overcome this thing that I gave them.
Yeah.
Or with their spouse. So a lot of homeschooling parents, they have the same thing that you mentioned. One of the partners has a strength and the other one has the same weakness. So it's a nice dovetail where you can help each other. So do you have a way, like a practical, tactical way to identify some of those skills or weaknesses in the other person, including your kids? And if the answer is no, that's fine, but I'm just curious.
Well, it's actually kind of no and yes. And so I'll start with the no part first, because really you can't know what you don't know. And so we have to, that's why I like the idea of leaning on a community of people. But I also want a community of people that's going to be, and I hate to say it's kind of cliche, but brutally honest. I want someone to be honest with me and say, Eric, you really stink at calling me back when you said you'd call me back, or doing this when you said you do this, or being on time, or doing this. I need other people to tell me that. So that's kind of my tactic in it. Is I'd grab not a lot of people. I don't. I'm actually kind of an isolated guy. I don't have big circles. I just my entourage is very small. Right now it's about 5 or 6, maybe 7 people. So I don't. But I depend upon those people to say, you did that thing wrong, or you did that thing right, and I ask for that. I ask for critique, and I'm very thick-skinned. I can take critique, good, great, good in between. And so I really depend upon other people. So my first part answer to that is no, I don't. The only tactic I have is depend upon others. And then the other side of that is, yes, I can see in my children what I know about myself, and that's really the only way, you said it, the only way I can really discern those things, and that's what we're talking about is discernment. Do I have the discernment of seeing what they're, how to shape them as a person, so that by the time they get to, when they leave our house and our house gets too small for them, then they leave, right? So when they leave, I want to know what that final product is going to be. So that for us and our children is the finish line. So we've drawn a very clear finish line for them. I want them to know Christ. I want them to be gracious. I want them to be meek. I want them to be, humble. I want them to know how to operate in the world without without any pretenses, to know that the world is fallen, to know that the world, that people are going to come after them, that shootings occur, that's most recent. I want them to know all of those things. And so that's the finish line. And so I guess my goal is to look at who they are now and to help shape them as they're young, and, just to apply what I know really about Scripture to them, what I know about the world, and teach them those things. And so I guess the second part of that, my answer would be yes, but it's very limited. It's limited to what I have learned myself. So you can't know what you don't know. And so that's why I say I depend upon others.
Does Stephanie have that level of discernment? Can she see in them and in other people strengths and weaknesses?
Absolutely. Yeah, she can see. She sees a lot of weakness in me. So, but she also sees a lot of strength in me too. So I don't want to just say that, but she can see and discern things that I can't discern. And so I depend upon her. And she's my primary. I depend upon her primarily. And, I'll always ask her questions, and I'll try to perceive things. And she becomes a good communicator after she eats something and has a cup of coffee. Anytime before that, so I'll wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm ready to roll. And I'm ready to have a full-on conversation.
And that's a mistake.
And that's absolutely a mistake. More arguments have occurred in that venue. So, I try to catch her at the right time when, she doesn't have anything else going on. And it's a short window. And I might bring up something that happened a few days prior and say, I need your eyes on this, and just really consider this. And, we might even have to spend some time in prayer about it before we respond. And that sounds, that's what we do. We have to spend time in prayer I pray for wisdom. I pray for wisdom because I don't have it. I don't have wisdom, but God gives freely to those who ask Him for wisdom. And so that's what I ask for, is wisdom to discern about myself, but also looking at my children and others around them that we even let in. Yeah, what they need, absolutely.
I want to be brutally honest then here with you. Your beard is delightful.
Thank you. Yours as well.
Thank you. But also, you yeah, man.
We got some beards.
We do. It's cooking.
We need a
mentioned
community beard oil.
while we're talking. That's great. You mentioned something that I think every dad, if they heard that, would say, yes, I agree, which is I want my children to be humble and meek and honest and kind, those things that I think, again, every dad would be like, yes, I want my son to grow into a man that has those qualities, or my daughter to grow into a woman that has those qualities. And I know Steve and I have talked about that on numerous occasions of how do we get there? So maybe what things are you doing as a dad to instill those qualities in your kids?
Character qualities.
Yeah, exactly. Because, homeschool, we can all read some homeschool book, but that's going to teach more, again, scientific facts or something that happened in history or a quadratic equation, but, you can't, read a book on humility and then become humble.
Yeah. So we have to start with who the child is. And I say that sounds weird, but I look at my son, and he's obviously different from his sister, but he's grown by leaps and bounds these past couple of years, 2 years, right? 4 to 6. Mm-hmm. I was like, what? You got to stop growing, I want you to stay right here. When I'm looking at my son, what I want to know, and, people look at us strange, but I want to know that I am the one that he's coming to for teaching. We have this. I think there's several things at play with this question. Let me just chase a couple of things. But you have other groups, and everybody tries to tell you how to raise your children. Everybody shut up when it comes to raising my own children. I don't mind being a helicopter kind of person. You've heard that expression, mm-hmm. right? Kind of hover over. I don't mind being that, because while they're young, that's where they're learning the most at the earliest age in their development and having to interact with other people. And so I want to be the one that he's learning from. And I don't mind being right over him. I don't mind being right there. I don't mind, every single, not every minute of the day, but everything that he does. I want to know what's going on. I want to see him operate. I want to see him operate. I want to see what he's doing. And if I disagree with it, or if it doesn't line up with what I want for him, then I'm going to change that. And then we're going to do it through discipline. And we're going to do it through giving him another way of thinking. And so he doesn't know what he did. Nobody, it's just the person, personhood is very strange. But he has to learn from me how to act in those situations. And so I'm watching him, and I'll give him just enough space, and he can get out there and do it. And later on, I might bring him closer and say, son, remember when you did that? You did that wrong. I'm not saying that everything requires discipline, but I'll bring him back in and say, this is what you did wrong. I want you to do this differently. And I'll let him back out there, and then he'll do it again, or he'll do it like I want him to. As he does that, he can get further and further and further away. And so I'm teaching him, bit by bit how I want him to respond, so that when he gets to that finish line, it makes sense to him when he gets there, because he might hate me in the short run, but he's gonna see the reason for it later on. And so that's how I kind of teach him, and how to teach humility. There is no way to teach humility, but I can put him in those situations, or see him in those situations, and say, son, you responded X. If humility says you should have responded Y, X and Y. You should have responded in a different way, completely opposite perhaps. So I can show him where humility would fit in to a situation that he's been in recently. And so you can't wait too long, because they're going to forget. And that's why I say I have to stay close to him. I have to stay in those situations where I can monitor that. And culture tells us, we shouldn't be that way, but I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly that we should be that way. We should be a close monitor, and especially fathers, we should be a close monitor of daughter, son, daughter, whoever it is, whichever gender that they are. We should be carefully considering who they are. For my daughter, it doesn't take much correction at all. I say one word in a wrong way, it's like a little mushroom cloud. Just, she blows. Yeah. She just explodes emotionally, and and so I have to say everything with a smile. I have to say this, and if I'm not watching, if I'm not careful, if my tone isn't turned up right at the very end, it's emotional mushroom, I guess you could say. And so I really try to with her. And she's very creative, and so I'm so careful not to squish creativity, but also show her how those situations could be done differently while, as soon as I see it happen in her. And so I guess it's more just letting them live, and then trying to correct that, in as close a time frame as I can get to that. So I have to be close by. I have to be present. Yeah. I can't. And so when we were praying, Lord, do we want to be a homeschool parent? We prayed for the means to do it, to do what we could do as we needed to do it, and depended upon Him. There's absolutely no other way to say it. We depended upon Him to provide the means so that we could be. And even if you have that 7 to 7 job, which I worked before. I worked, 6 to 6, 6 to 7, 6 to 8, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. But just so we're clear, I've worked those 14, 15-hour shifts a day and come home and had nothing absolutely to give to one person in my house. But I still had to reach deep inside and go, what did you do in school today? Follow up. What did you do today? Show me your work. Show me your coloring pictures. Show me even if they're just climbing into bed sometimes. And there have been many of those nights. But we prayed for the means to minister. I say minister to them, teach them, to train them so that we could get them across that finish line one day, Lord willing. So, 12 years from now, maybe we might have one. We'll see.
I'd like to dig into that. Something you said early as you're kind of introducing, you said you guys are busy, and you said there's like almost no downtime was the way you said it. Yeah. There's almost no downtime in the family because you guys have a lot of things going on. Yeah. That coupled with what you just said in terms of how you're, how sometimes you come home and you're like, but you still were able to dig in there and grab something and say, okay, let me engage with the kids because I value this. As a family, we value this. 2 questions.
Sure.
You can answer them however you want to answer them.
Sure.
First, how do you handle the scheduling of time? And now that your schedule has changed, you're not working those 15-hour shifts, and you, I guess, as a pastor, your schedule's a bit more flexible.
Yeah.
How do you handle your schedule, number one, as a homeschooling dad? And then how do you handle giving when it doesn't just come naturally?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So when the time frame is difficult because we have the morning times and we try to fit as much as we can into those mornings. And so some days it looks like, we were just up until 10, 11 o'clock. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock sometimes as parents, working, following up, scheduling emails. So we'll find time, we'll have to schedule emails to go out the next day so that they can be read, we have to set aside that time because it's what we agreed to do. And so we intentionally carve out the best time for our children, and then we just have to pray to the Lord that we stay healthy enough, through staying up late, through, even skipping meals, whatever it takes. And so that I say that's actually kind of a motto that we kind of adopted, whatever it takes. It's whatever it takes in our family to make sure we accomplish the goals that we agreed to accomplish, and that is to teach our children. And so we have to turn the phones off. We have to turn the TVs off. We don't even have TV per se in our house. We don't have any kind of satellite or anything, but we have to turn the movies off. We have to turn the phone. We have to lay the phones down. We have to turn all the social media accounts off, and we have to say, this time is devoted to this thing. And if we miss that, if we drop that, then it's gonna be a negative thing further down the road. And so we have to attack it. We have to do whatever it takes. And I was just kind of showing them how to. Today, I said we were learning soccer. I never played soccer, but it's not hard to figure out. So I was able to teach them just a couple of things playing soccer. I said, this is how you get the ball through the goal. And so how do you do that? Well, you have to pursue the ball and aim towards the goal. And so that's all we have to do is we just kind of aim towards that way and, keep kicking the ball in that direction so that we can make that time happen. And that's an everyday thing, if we drop it one day, we don't beat one another up. We just say, okay, this is what we got to cut out to make it happen next day or the day after. But then so the second part of the question, how do I handle?
Well, earlier you said that you're not I think your words were, I'm not a kind person.
Yeah.
I'm
not a friendly person.
So if you have that
nice
piece, right, and you have to give to the kids, but say you were up at 2, sending those emails or doing your side hustle stuff.
Yeah.
How do you have any tips specifically for dads who are experiencing this, especially families who have decided to homeschool? A lot of times they've sacrificed financially to make that possible. So a lot of people have these kind of side hustles or stuff they're doing late at night to whatever it takes.
Moonlighting. Yeah. I think and I would recommend any of those, whatever it takes to make homeschooling possible, whatever it takes to make that happen. And so to dig deep, you just have to. I hate to say it this way, but you kind of gotta man up and just do it. I mean, there's no trick to it. If I'm being chased by something or someone, I'm gonna run. I might not be the best looking runner, but I'm gonna run. And by the grace of God, I'm gonna outrun whatever's chasing me. And so that's what I want to teach them and to train them to do, is to dig as deep as they can and just do it. And there's no. I wish there were some kind of formula that we could lay out how to dig deeper when you don't feel like digging. John Piper wrote a book. It said, "What to do when I don't desire God." I wish there was a way to say, this is what you do when you don't feel like doing it. And the easiest answer is just to kind of man up. And we're a lot stronger. I think we depend upon the Lord's strength to do it. And that's the strength that I have to depend upon. And so when people see in me, a strength that they don't have, I just have to say, well, it's the Lord doing it in me. And so He's given us that strength. I mean, He gives. If there's any strength that we have, it's the Lord. And so, what strength don't we have except an infinite, eternal strength? And so, when pursuing our family, if we understand the family is the most primary, the most essential part of who we are as believers, as the church, then our primary goal is going to be to teach them to do what's most important in life. And so we have several things that we say about that, but ultimately we believe the greatest thing man could ever do is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever. So if that's the case, then I want my children to know I'm going to do that. I'm going to, and even when it doesn't look pretty, I might roll out of bed sometimes and I don't look like I ought to look, like I want to look. And so I just have to work and change that, I don't always come home and feel like I have something else, but I look at them as the person that I'm in charge of, which is scary thing sometimes. I want to apologize to them first. I'm sorry that I'm in charge of you, but it is what it is, right? So I just have to say, as a result of, what the Lord has given me as this task, then, I want to apply everything I have to it.
I like what you're saying there, because I think sometimes we have, maybe especially if you're just starting, like these kind of rosy pictures of like what homeschool life is going to be, and it's, oh man, it's cool. My wife can get up and cook breakfast for the family, and then my kids will be obedient around the table, and I'll come home and be happy. Yeah, like it'll be awesome. But like there's these kind of like very like ugly and difficult things that we have to do. But, and I don't want to put words in your mouth with this, but it seems to be like, as the dad, like at the end of the day, it's your job to protect that family time, to set these goals, to say, okay, we've made some commitments, and you know what, I've got nothing left, but we're going to do it. Yeah. Okay, and I'm gonna get up, even though I don't feel like it. I'm gonna turn my phone off. I'm going to engage my wife, engage my kids. But again, it's, there's those roles that maybe the mom or the wife has, but, kind of basically the buck stops with us.
Yeah.
Like we are the ones that are accountable.
Yeah.
And so if we want to reach those end goals, like you take a look in the mirror.
Yeah.
It's on you.
Well, and I think it starts with a person with, as men. So the Lord blesses us with families of 1, of 2, 3, sometimes 10 people. So where it was just you as a man, what you did in secret is what you're going to do in public. And, when the Lord decides to bless you with a family, I believe it's because you have earned that. As a dad, you have been. It's obviously grace on his part, but he's He's blessing you with that opportunity to raise a family. And so you've just kind of multiplied yourself and, across, a few different people. And then, even more so when we get into these other opportunities as families to lead other families, that's even greater blessing. And so, there's definitely an opportunity to, with your family, model what the family should be. And so that's the opportunity that I think the Lord gives to believers in the church, and you can model that for others. And but yes, ultimately the buck stops with the father. And so if there's a family that's not, even Scripture tells us that if a man cannot have a family that does what the Bible says to do, then he should not be in leadership anywhere else. And so if there's a point where the father says, well, my family's not doing what we ought to do, well, it's, it has to rest on, I always point to my shoulders, that's where it rests. If there's a person, even in our church, that, their spiritual development, I'm going to answer for that. And so as a person who's held accountable, I want to give the best response I can. This is the response I have. I did what I was supposed to do. I've spent time in prayer over them at the beginning, the middle, and the end. I've gone all the way through it. And that's how I can give the best account for that person or that group of people. And so that's what we're doing even with our church, is to say if we're going to be accountable as a family, as me, then we're going to be doing some things before we get there to make sure that I'm going to be able to give a good account of, the people I was leading.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier. You mentioned goals. One of the way you were framing that was the finish line. Like, you have this goal for your kids and your family. I think you even said specifically some of those things. Like you talked about some of the character attributes you expect or you want to instill in them. I'm curious on maybe a more on a grander scale. What are some of the goals that you guys as a family have set up for your homeschool, or academic goals maybe?
Well, it's a good question. I don't think we have many. So we're just kind of starting out. I know some things I want them to learn, but I really don't have any goals in the finish line of the homeschool part of it. I want to still be a family when we get done. Maybe that is a goal. I don't know. I want my children to call me, when they go to college occasionally. So, as far as a goal, I want to see them succeed at whatever they do in life. And so, and it may sound kind of cliche, but I really want them to do whatever they want. I want them to do what makes them happy. And so this is the time that I see training them, that when they get there, then they can turn around and do whatever they want to. They want to, fly to Africa and live there for the rest of their lives. Great. I hope you love it. Just call me, or come home sometime, because I'm definitely not going. But I want them to.
Right?
Never say never. I've said never once or twice, but I want them to do whatever makes them happy. And this time, during this way, I want them to know this is what you have to learn. This is what you have to do in order to get to that marker, in order to get to that finish line. And so one of the ways that we've done that is to say, by the end of our schooling, they're gonna graduate. They're gonna do some things, and then they're gonna go and do some more schooling outside of, just to see how they do. So. Not very many goals, but I think there's a couple in there maybe we could hash out.
Something else. I don't know all the details, so this is kind of a cold question. I know I didn't prepare you for this one, but
I like cold questions. Goes good with hot coffee.
yeah. There it is. So, what have you guys as a family? What kind of sacrifice? Most of the people that I've talked to who have been homeschool families have intentionally made sacrifices in order to make homeschooling an option. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the, you don't have to get too personal, but what are some of the sacrifices you guys have made that other dads might hear that and say, yep, me too, or wow, that's a sacrifice that maybe I am willing to take that I didn't think I was?
Right. So we're big on budgeting. We've always been that way. And I don't like to name drop sometimes, but we started in 2000. We were married in March 2007, and then in August of 2007, August of 2007, we went through and completed the Financial Peace University's Dave Ramsey thing, and I loved it and enjoyed it, and it just lit a fire for budgeting, and so I thought I was he calls them nerds and free spirits, right? And so I thought I was the free spirit, and I'm not. I'm actually the nerd. I'm the one that's like, if the numbers, I see like the matrix of numbers and budgeting, and I want to know that our finances are throttled, and so I've intentionally put a very, very thin line budget in place, such to the extent that we could live. I mean, if I said the number, you'd be surprised. We could live off of very, very little in our home, and we've done a lot of. So the word sacrifice, I think, is right up there. We have intentionally, since 2007, lived on a budget every single month, written down on paper. So that's 123 budgets, somewhere in there. So we've intentionally lived on a budget for 10 years now. Mm-hmm. There were a few months this summer, so maybe 120 we didn't budget. I was like rebel. I was like, not going to budget at all. So the summertime July, we were like, we're not budgeting, and it completely fell apart. So we jumped right back on the budget, and so what we sacrificed is, from 2007 forward, we did not pursue many assets in the home. So we don't have a boat. We don't have, 4 cars. We've got a Camaro out there, but that's about it. We don't have, barns of plenty. We don't have those things. We've sacrificed a lot. We sacrifice what I think we are okay with doing without, if that makes sense. And so we even went so far as in 2015, we had purchased a car. Well, we turned around and sold the car just because we didn't, we wanted to become completely debt free. And so that was the driver for us. And so if I could point to one of two things, it would be the budgeting. It would be to say we have intentionally taken little so that we would not become hungry, so we wouldn't become thirsty or have an appetite for more. And so that's one of the things that we sacrificed, is all of the things that we know that we can live without. But the second thing is actually work. We've sacrificed a lot of our free time to pursue hard work, and not just, getting out there and digging a ditch just to bury it again. And we want to work, smart, not just hard, but we want to do hard things. We want our family to know that it's okay to do hard or difficult things that other people are not willing to do or not able to do, perhaps.
What are some examples of hard work?
Well, for us, it is. So I grew up in a family business and industrial type business. One of the things that we do in that business, and that may be somewhere I've learned it, but we study to do the things like driving a vehicle commercially, like getting licenses and and things that we can use outside of the home, licenses and certificates of different kinds. And so whatever it takes to operate a business, that's, if whatever you decide in a business, that's what we do. And I always have told my family I want you to be more of an entrepreneur than just going to and working in a job somewhere. And so to do hard things means you take the risk of failing and you make it your own. And so I tell them all the time, take a risk in doing this. Take a risk in doing that. And so for me to do something hard, to do something, means to take a risk and reach out and just see if you can do it. And if you can't, you let go. Even if you fail, I'm not even going to say what the cliche is right here, but even if you fail, it's okay. We're as a family, we're here together, and we want you to reach out and do that. That's what I want my son to do. I want him to go start his own business somewhere at the age of, if I need to be the person to sign on with him, go do it. And so whatever the business is, I'll support him if it's something that he wants to do. And I'll do whatever it takes to make that happen, whether it be financial, investing into him. I trust his and will trust his wisdom in pursuing that. And so when I say to do hard things, that's what I mean, is to reach out and to start our own business, to work and to do things. So I don't just think of work as, I'm going to go, plow a field for somebody else, but I'm going to go find a way to buy my own field and plow it for myself. And so that's what I mean when I say to do hard work.
Take the more difficult path as opposed to the easy path, which is get a job, clock in, clock out, go home.
Yeah.
That's the easy path.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And sometimes as entrepreneurs, we look and we say, man, that'd be nice sometimes. It'd be so much easier to just get a paycheck and be done. But anyway. Okay, so we circled back to some sacrifices. So some of the financial and the budgeting sacrifices, is that what made it feasible for you guys to even entertain homeschooling, like without like two-income family? Because that's one of the biggest arguments we hear about homeschooling is we're getting money.
I know it is, and that is probably the one. You have to. Every family needs to have a budget. Everyone that does anything needs to have a budget. Our country should have a budget, in my opinion. Our church is fixing to vote on.
I'm kidding.
Our church is about to vote on our budget. For every entity, you have to have a budget. You have to have how money comes in and how money goes out, and we look at that as a family because my family is on a budget. We look at how our money comes in. And if our money is trickling in, guess what? Our money's going to trickle out, and we're not going to, open up the gates on the other side and let it all flow out. If it trickles in, it's going to trickle out. If it flows in, it's going to flow out. And so it's just that's the way I see how our currency works. It just kind of flows in, flows out. And so for us, the two incomes were great. It was beautiful. We've just gotten to that spot where we actually have two incomes again. But the one income was sufficient. And, it takes it takes a different type of person or a different type of attitude to say, we're not going to do this anymore. I'm not going to keep paying rent. I'm going to go, even if I have to go buy, a piece of junk house and fix it up. That's what I did. I went and fixed it up, and I slept there, with no nothing. The electricity wasn't even on, and I slept in the house, and so that I could wake up the next morning and do work. I came in, worked late, slept there, went to work the next day, and so even in that remodeling a house, it was an opportunity for us to stay out of debt. As I didn't want to go buy a house, even around here, you're talking about $200,000, $250 some odd $1,000. I'm not about to go pay that. I want to find the harder route, the less traveled route, and do that. I'd rather do that because that's what there's a reason why nobody's trying, because it's hard.
Yeah, if I can jump in on that, I mean,
Sure.
that's I think something where, as dads, and again, we talked about, being the leader of the family, kind of making sure these things get done. And it sounds like you've been able for several years to make some difficult decisions of that's sell the car, or we're going to get this house and it's going to take hard work to do it. But for you, how do you like actually pull the trigger on the hard decision? Because I know that dads are probably like, man, we should sell this thing, or I should try to start this little side gig. And I know it's going to mean I'm going to put the kids to sleep and spend some time with my wife. And then at 11:15 p.m., I'm going to try to work on this thing. Like, how do you actually say, okay, I'm doing it? What's your steps to do that?
So I find it best to just talk about it first and just say it. And I'm not the kind of person that's like, oh, say it makes the universe happen. I'm not that kind of person. I like to hash things out with people. And so there's been things that we've talked about even here today. I've talked with other individuals who have done it. I want to go find a skinny person and eat what they eat. I want to go find a rich person and don't spend on things that they don't spend money on. So I just talk to people about things and say, what do I do in this situation? Well, how do I? And I leaned on my pastor very heavily. Every pastor that I've had. Now I don't really lean on my pastor that much. But I really try to just talk about them. And so I'll talk to Stephanie about it, and she's the one I talk to the most. And she hates when I start talking about new things because she knows that's what's going to happen. And it's not me talking about it that makes it happen. It's just, it's an idea and it floats around and you start talking about it. And it kind of makes it more of a reality than if you just leave it in your head. And so I'll talk about stupid things all the time. And maybe 10% of them catch and actually become good ideas. And so so that means I have to talk a lot, right? And so I have to talk to my wife a lot. I like that. She doesn't, but I do. I have to talk to her a lot about things that are floating around in my head. And I'll say, Stephanie, I think we need to do this. And she says, no, that's a stupid idea. I say, okay. Or she says, hey, that might work. I want to talk about that more, and let's talk about that. And so we'll talk about it, and then it makes the decision-making process easier, because technically that is the decision-making process, is talking about it, is formulating the plan to say, this is the direction we're going to go. I told my daughter that today. I said, Amelia, you unless you tell somebody something, it never really happened. I said, if it's all in your head, you didn't communicate it to somebody, they're not going to know what you're thinking. And so that's the way I talk to my wife, and that's the way I make that decision. Is I'll say, hey, we should sell this house and move into a camper. My wife says, no, that's a stupid idea. We're not doing that. Okay, problem solved. We're not doing it.
Just want to talk about it.
Just wanted to talk about it. That's all. And so that happened November of last year. I said, Stephanie, I think we need to pursue being a pastor at this church. Really? Yes. Okay. What does that look like? Well, it looks like this. So in the process of that, even just talking about it, and then you start the process of praying about it. And that's where you just take your plans and, we could do whatever we want to, or say it, do whatever we want, but it's God that directs a man's steps. And so for us as Christians, we say, God, what do you want for us? And so while I may talk about it, unless we're praying about it, unless we're doing it, and that's where we find that the most surety in making a decision. So after we've kind of talked about it and said this is stupid or not stupid, we'll take it before the Lord, and He might say, no, that is stupid actually, and you're not going to do that. But then about 5% of the stuff that we say actually becomes reality when He blesses it and when He does what He wants to do through us. And so the sacrifices that we've made, the work that we've done, the decision makings the decisions that we've made, ultimately have been gone through, and we've filtered them through what God's word says and pursued him in those things. And then we just say, let it be so. And even if, you guys have businesses, we've worked for other people before, you know what it's like to step out and go, I'm going to do this. And it's a big thing and it's a nerve-wracking thing. And unless the Lord does it, unless the Lord leads it, it's not going to hold water. And so we've failed at some things. We've failed, we've pursued different things and they've fallen flat on their face. Mm-hmm. And the Lord was in it and it was a good thing and it lasted for a while, but then it dissolved and it dissipated and it went away. And then he steps in and makes something even greater happen. He moves us to a little town where we find a group of people that we like and we find a church that we like and, we're able to minister to our own family better. And so, it's in those things that he really puts it in front of us and says, this is what you're going to do, or this is what you're not going to do.
Mm-hmm. As we wrap up, I would love to hear if you have any advice for, I'd love to hear any advice you have for Dad. And then the second piece, maybe it's a second round of answers, but someone who hasn't started homeschooling yet, like what should they expect? What's something that they could consider before pulling the trigger and saying, yeah, let's definitely do it. Let's homeschool. Okay.
So advice for Dad on what to do, it really takes a different kind of mentality to, when I say budgeting, if it's not something that you want, you're not going to do it. And so you have to question what you want to do. And, why am I pursuing this? What's the reason I want to pursue this? Is it to just get my family out of debt, which is a great reason? Is it so I can homeschool, stay home more? I want to stay home